Welcome to All Apple Pie and Stuff. I'm Lauren and I'm here with my mom Jennifer, and today we're talking chronic illnesses.
Are you kicking it to me?
I thought you were taking it over.
All right, so I guess there's so much to unpack with chronic illnesses, particularly when it comes to motherhood. So you could be a mom who struggles with a chronic illness, and those can include autoimmune system diseases like lupus, kidney disease. What are some of the other ones? I know there's a lot. I have Chiari malformation, which is just strange and weird. Uh,
Um, Hashimoto's is autoimmune.
Hashimoto's. There's also chronic pain due to past injuries and things of that nature that a lot of moms are dealing with. Hormone issues,
You
which
know,
I guess would that wouldn't be autoimmune.
it kind of depends, I think, what causes it because it can be autoimmune.
Right. And so Lauren had a lot of problems really since she hit puberty that really ramped up when she turned, what, about 18, I think, right?
Yeah, it was right around like 18, probably more like 19. I mean, it got weird right about 18, but then I started with like the weight gain and issues like that a little bit later.
Right. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because that was, so now she's a mom now. She was dealing with it before she was a mom, but it got worse after becoming a mother. And she went to a lot of different doctors, and they all always said she was fine. Like everything was normal.
Yeah, so I know I was fairly young. I want to say like 13 or 14 the first time I like, because I talked with you about it and you were like, yeah, those issues aren't normal, like the heavy bleeding and the cramping and everything else I was dealing with. You were like, those aren't normal issues. So I went to see a doctor then and ended up on birth control. And the first one they tried was one of those like, um, the delayed cycles where you only get like 4 periods a year or something.
Right. And it didn't work.
It didn't work. I actually ended up bleeding for like a month straight, and then I quit
Hmm.
taking it, and then I bled for like another month, and it was stupid. So I went off the birth control and just figured, screw it, I'll find a way to deal with it. Then about 18, I went to another doctor about it, basically ended up trying birth control again. It worked okay that time for like a year. And then it just, everything started going wonky again. So then I quit taking it. Um, and then shortly after that, I got married and we started trying to have a kid right away and ended up dealing with infertility. I went to see, I don't even know how many doctors, heard all kinds of stupid things like,
Take a
you're,
vacation and lose some weight.
yeah, you're fat and you should take a vacation, even though I wasn't fat when we started trying to get pregnant, but I started gaining weight really for no logical reason. Like my eating habits hadn't really changed, my exercise habits were better,
Yeah.
but I was gaining weight and I couldn't get it off. Um, so I saw several doctors who all pretty much just kind of pissed me off and told me they didn't know what was wrong. And then, took a few years. We ended up making some dietary changes. I cut out soy. And a few months after cutting out soy is when I was able to get pregnant with Henry. Um, I had him. It was a pretty, pregnancy was its own beast. But I remember telling my mom after I had him that I was still having some weirdness. Like I would have just these like weird, very short cycles. And I was thinking like, maybe something's wrong. I might go see a doctor. Well, then I ended up getting pregnant with Ava, so I didn't think anything of it. But then after I had Ava, I just had all kinds of weird bleeding and like I would get dizzy just sitting in one place, and that was stupid. And fatigue. So I went to my OB. They did a whole battery of tests to see like if it was a hemoglobin issue because I did hemorrhage after I had her. So they were checking like my iron, my hemoglobin, all of that jazz, and it all came back normal. So they were basically just like, well, it's just part of being a new mom. You're just tired because you're not getting enough sleep. You're a new mom.
Welcome to motherhood.
Welcome to motherhood. Oh, and I forgot to mention the one symptom at 18 that really made me go, wow, something's weird. My boobs got huge. I went from
Like overnight.
Yeah, like overnight. I
She
wore
came
from
downstairs one morning when she woke up, and I was like, what the hell happened to your boobs? And she's like, I don't know, nothing fits. And I asked her if she was pregnant. Because I mean, it was like overnight they blew up.
Yeah, I had worn from hitting puberty at 11 until I turned 18. I had pretty consistently worn like a B cup.
Mhm.
And then I woke up one day with like triple D boobs.
Well, no, it was a C.
It was a C.
It was a C that day because that day we went shopping and I got her bras.
And then it was
And
like 6 months later.
it wasn't even 6 months later. It was like a week later. I ended up buying you a D. And then you went away to college. And when I went to visit her, she was like flotation devices. But
Yeah.
she hadn't put weight on. So it was like, what is going on with your boobs? And she's like, I don't know.
Well, and that was another thing where I heard doctors tell me that, like, oh, it's just because you put on weight. I'm like, I've put on weight now, but
But you
when this
didn't.
started happening, I had lost 20 pounds between
Right.
when you dropped me off at college and when you saw me.
Right.
But my boobs had gained several cup sizes. And I think by the last time I measured, which granted, the last time I measured, I am breastfeeding, but I was measuring at an L cup, which is stupid. So that was another symptom. But then after I had Ava, like I said, they did all the tests. They basically said, well, nothing's wrong. So I ignored it, but then I had kind of a lot of bleeding. I thought maybe it was a continuation of like the postpartum hemorrhage or something else had gone wrong. Hey, chill. Thinking.
Hey, baby.
There she is.
Hi.
Thinking maybe something else had gone wrong, like, a hormone issue or polyps, or I don't even know. There was just a lot of.
I thought maybe polyps because I had those. So,
Yeah.
A lot of times your daughters will have the same kind of garbage in the female department that moms have. And I did have polyps and endometrial dysplasia and all this kind of stuff. That's why I got a hysterectomy. So I thought maybe that it was that. Wasn't.
Yeah, so I ended up going to see a physician assistant, and I was all ready before I went. Like, I had my script planned in my head of how I was going to advocate for myself because I was tired of all the doctors who just basically went, well, take birth control. It's hormonal, so just take birth control. And this woman walked into the room and she's looking at my symptoms, and the first thing she says to me is, I don't like to prescribe birth control. I would really like to figure out what the root cause is. And I mean, I was pretty shocked. So she ended up doing a bunch more tests. She mentioned thyroid testing. And I had told her, like, oh, they tested my thyroid before. She's like, yeah, but they only tested one thing. She's like, if there's all these other thyroid hormones, why wouldn't we check those too? And what it came back as is they did an ultrasound, found nothing on the ultrasound. Well, that's not true. They found a cyst on the ultrasound, but that's neither here nor there. It's supposedly a benign cyst that I've likely had my whole life. But she found that I had an underfunctioning thyroid and insulin resistance. So she prescribed a thyroid medication, metformin, and then because I met some of the criteria for PCOS as well, even though I don't physically have the standard PCOS look, she also recommended another medication that helps with some of the cortisol levels and androgen levels, which I haven't started taking that one yet. But I started the thyroid medication and metformin, and within, what's it been, a week and a half now? I'm not having the weird dizzy spells. I don't feel as exhausted all the time. So, it was just motherhood that I felt like crap and was getting randomly so dizzy that I felt unsafe holding my children. But, the thyroid medication fixed it.
Yeah, and so I want to talk about advocating for yourself because I've mentioned on the show many times about the Chiari malformation, which basically means that my brain was squished. And I had symptoms since I was a teenager, but they were few and far between. They got worse after a surgery that I had. And I was constantly being told basically that I was crazy. So I quit going to doctors for a long time until it got not just inconvenient, it was altering my life. So I got so bad, my family was really afraid I was going to die. Like either die because of what was going on, or die because I fell, or die because I had dementia and I would be lost somewhere or hit a car or something. So that's how bad it got. And they kept telling me I was fine. So it's really important to advocate for yourself. And it's really important. And I know it's really hard, especially with insurance, which I think we want to talk about that as well.
Yes.
A lot of times it can be like it's going to be so costly and they're just going to tell me I'm crazy. So whatever, I'll just deal with it. It's your health, it's your life, and you need to be there and be okay for your children. And luckily, when mine got really bad, my kids were adults already, and I had grandchildren. So I didn't feel as much of the immediate concern until it came to the point where it was getting pretty dangerous. So you do have to advocate for yourself, and sometimes you have to fire a lot of doctors and go to a lot of doctors. And I know that that's costly, time consuming. You wait forever for a doctor's appointment. Don't underestimate. She was a physician's assistant. The lady who finally did the testing that needed to be done for me was a nurse practitioner. So don't be afraid to go to those people, because a lot of times they'll do the doctors tend to get, and I don't want to crap on every doctor because I've had some really good ones, but I've had a lot of really not good ones, because doctors are told, and I've said this on the podcast before, when they go to medical school, when you hear hoof prints, think horses, not zebras. Sometimes it's a freaking zebra. Sometimes it might even be a damn unicorn. Okay, so sometimes think something weird. Well, so, but they don't, and they get so high and mighty. And if you try to advocate for yourself, a lot of times they actually get offended that you don't think they're God, that they shut down and don't want to listen to you. So sometimes a physician's assistant or a nurse practitioner are more open to being like, hey, let's maybe try this. Let's research this together. And that's helpful sometimes, especially if you got a zebra going on.
Well, and that's one of the things too, because I always figured it was an estrogen problem because the giant boobs, the fact that we had infertility, and removing soy is what ultimately helped. Soy is processed as estrogen in the body, and it doesn't affect everybody, because I know we've gotten that criticism before. You know, we ate all kinds of soy and I still got pregnant. Yes, you can still get pregnant when you eat soy. But for some people, if you're estrogen sensitive for whatever reason, you know,
the soy becomes a problem. See, like for me, I'm menopausal, so I can eat as much soy as I want. Doesn't matter.
Right. And what I learned after, you know, she actually tested my thyroid. So what she found is essentially I was in pretty early stages of like hypothyroidism. So most people don't get diagnosed until the symptoms are significantly worse. We happened to catch it kind of earlier. And it didn't present in the typical way. Typically, when you have your thyroid hormones tested, your TSH, if you have an underfunctioning thyroid, will be very high. And mine is not. Mine's actually fairly low. But all of my other thyroid hormones are too low too. So it's a little bit of a weird case. We're still kind of unpacking that. But when your thyroid is not functioning properly, your body has a harder time clearing excess estrogen. So it's very likely the thyroid issue is part of what caused so many of my high estrogen symptoms.
Right. So the other thing about having a chronic illness as a mom, or just as a woman in general, or even a man, but men don't watch our show. So and if they do, we love you too. But
right, still valid. It's fine.
it's still valid. So yes, I direct this at women because we're a woman show and all of that, but it's just people in general. When you're dealing with a chronic illness, you can look fine. In fact, until I got really, really bad, I worked at my job for 14 years and people had no idea because I really pushed myself and I was physically active, but I was in chronic pain for decades. Nobody knew because I didn't sit around complaining about it because I'm a mom and I have a daughter with a chronic illness. Um, Lauren has a chronic illness now, but she didn't have a chronic illness growing up. Her sister does. And so I had a daughter or have a daughter with a pretty serious health issue. And then she had a baby by the time my symptoms got really super bad. And it was a high risk pregnancy and I helped her through that. And I was helping her with the baby and all of that because she ended up with a C-section and she needed to heal. Plus, she's extra tired because of her chronic illness and stuff. So, I had to keep on keeping on, and that's just what you do. So people had no idea what I was going through on a daily basis. And if I would say something like, because with my condition, like I would often have muscle aches or joint pain, headaches that were debilitating. Well, they weren't debilitating because I was going through life like I didn't have them, but they were severe because since I had the surgery, I had the headache literally 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for 10 years. So somehow I was living like that every day. I don't know how because I still get the headaches, just I don't have them all the time. Now I get them intermittently and it's usually pretty quick. They don't usually last more than like 10 minutes. And when I get them now, I'm like, how was I living like this for 10 years? But I did. But if I would say something like, oh my God, my head hurts, and then people would be like, oh, suck it up, Buttercup, take an aspirin. Or, oh, you think your knee hurts? Blah, 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 blah. So a lot of people look at you and they don't know really what you're dealing with. So that's really frustrating. And then people who have the stuff like whatever chronic illness that puts weight on you, well, just quit eating the Twinkies or you know what I mean? And so you have to deal with that, and you can't really explain it to other people, I guess, especially when you don't even know what you have and they're telling you you're crazy and it's all in your head.
Or consistently telling you you're fat. I don't know how many doctors before the one I saw as an OB with Henry and with Ava, like my OB was absolutely phenomenal. She never once even really mentioned the weight, other than in the beginning of pregnancy with Ava, I lost quite a bit of weight initially. And she was like, hey, do you need some Zofran or something? Because you shouldn't really be losing weight. But I remember my husband saying something to me one day about like, oh, why don't you go talk to a doctor about whatever it was I was complaining about that day? And I was like, why? So they can just tell me I'm fat and there's nothing else wrong with me. And like, so the PA I've been seeing, she was saying like, okay, we think an ideal weight for you is going to be between about 160 to about 175. So when that first doctor, who was just basically like, you're fat, you should take a vacation and you'll probably get pregnant if you lose like 20 pounds and take a vacation. I was only 176 pounds when I went to see her. So I was a smidge above what's considered like the healthy range for my height. And she was still using that as an excuse. So don't take that as an excuse either. Yes, some issues can be caused because you're fat. But prove to me that the issue is just because I'm fat.
When they're talking about infertility, like I know a lot of fat people that get pregnant and have babies. So fat in and of itself does not prohibit you from having children. There's got to be some kind of underlying thing that taking the weight off. Like we do know people who have what is that? Where if you lose some weight, it's going to be better. Otherwise, is it the PCOS?
I was going to say I know with PCOS because my friend who's been struggling with that has talked with many other people with her same condition, and they found like when they started losing weight and got back down towards the healthy weight, their body started ovulating regularly again.
Right. So if the weight is preventing you from ovulating, that's the issue. So if you're heavy and you're ovulating, you can get pregnant. It doesn't have anything to do with having a big ass or whatever. Like,
Well, and by all accounts, like I was heavy and I got heavier after that. I was, I mean, almost 200 pounds before I got pregnant with Henry. Lost some of that weight and then found out I was pregnant. But um, I'm sorry, my train of thought just dipped.
you were heavy.
Oh, yeah, I was heavy, but they had done like a whole battery of tests, and by all accounts, it looked on paper like I was ovulating regularly. There shouldn't have been any cause for concern based on all of the tests they ran, other than like one thing got flagged by the fertility clinic, which I can't even get the records from. Um, and that was just high platelets, which shouldn't have really had any effect on my ability to get pregnant. So,
Well, the bottom line is don't take this stuff that they say, and I swear they're just trying to put women in mental institutions by having you have a complete breakdown. And I know that's very cynical, but I've been through so much with doctors, not just with myself, with my child. So as a mom with a child with a chronic illness, we'll talk a little bit about that. My daughter got very sick when she was 5. It turned into a chronic illness that she will have lifelong. So when it first happened, the symptoms were very scary and very apparent. And so the sky was falling. Because I thought she had a flesh-eating disease. Like, I didn't know. You know, because her original illness caused bruising, and there was the whole, what is it, strep, whatever, that's the flesh-eating disease.
yeah.
I don't, but I was like, oh my God, my kid has this flesh-eating disease and whatever. Anyway, she didn't. But so that was, you know, there's a lot of adrenaline and there's a lot going on. Well, I did a lot of research on my own, thank God, or she would have died. And I'm not saying that to be dramatic, it's just true. Because the hospital didn't catch how bad it really was. She had several recurrences of it in a 3-month time, I think it was. And she really needed to go to a pediatric nephrologist, but they didn't even catch that it was kidney involvement in it. So, yes, if you have a child who has any illness, because it didn't start out seeming to be a chronic illness, it turned into, so she had a rare disease that is an acute thing, whatever, that happens for God knows why, nobody even knows. And then it caused an autoimmune response that ended up being a chronic illness, if that makes sense. So you have to realize that a regular hospital is not set up for children. I didn't know that then, but I know that now. So I'm going to impart that knowledge on you. So regular hospitals, they are awesome for your regular viruses. They're awesome for a broken bone, things of that nature, things that are hoof prints, that are horses. They're okay for that. If it's looking like it's something more, you want to go to a children's hospital. Their equipment is calibrated for children and it is not the same. The norms are different for children than they are for adults. They don't always know that, especially like in these community hospitals. It doesn't mean those hospitals are bad. Those hospitals are just not set up for that. They don't have the expertise. So very important to get your child to a children's hospital, have that checked out. It's very important to do some of your own research. If you're a person that's not going to freak out and go, you know, into the weeds, and I don't say diagnose your children. My daughter actually did have a diagnosis from the start. They just didn't catch the kidney involvement. I did a lot of research because I felt like something was going on. So I want to say, very important to trust your mother gut. Could you be wrong? Yes, maybe. And maybe you'll take her or him to a hospital or whatever, and they're going to think you're a hysterical mom. Who cares? I would rather have 100 times be a hysterical mom than one time be wrong and I didn't get my child care.
And I think just adding on to that, because I don't have children with chronic illnesses, at least not yet, hopefully not ever. But you never know what life will bring. But there was a scare with Henry. He was doing this thing at about 4 months old. It looked a lot. I had stumbled across it, infantile spasms, which are seizures that occur like in a series, like in clusters, and then stop for a little bit and then recur again. And they don't look that scary at the start, but it is considered an emergency. Like if you would think your child might have it, you should get them checked out immediately, because the longer it goes on, the more likely it is that it can cause long-term permanent brain damage. But that's what I thought was going on. So a couple of takeaways from what I did that I think, if you are noticing something with your child that you think is weird, take a video of it before you go. I'm sure you've got your phone, you've taken all kinds of pictures of your kid. If they're doing something weird that you want to bring up with their doctor, take a video and then bring that video with you. If you happen to research something, so like I took videos of what he was doing for a couple of days before I even went to the doctor. And then as I was researching more, I was like, I'm just going to take him into the emergency room. I don't want to wait. The other thing I did was I had already kind of looked up infantile spasms and I knew it was rare. So I printed out basically like a whole article talking about, here are the symptoms, here's how they present, here's information in terms of like how it's diagnosed and what you should be looking for as a doctor. And I brought that with me. And when I went to the emergency room here, they basically told me it was nothing and I should come back if he was having a grand mal seizure, because there's only one type of seizure, is basically what that doctor told me, which is wrong.
Very wrong.
Anyone who has any sort of medical training should know that there's more than one kind of seizure. But he basically described a grand mal seizure and said, it's not that, so he's fine, just take him home. And I wasn't cool with that answer, because not only did he didn't look at the videos, he didn't look at the stuff I had printed out. He basically took one look at my child and said he's fine. And ultimately he was fine. But we took him to the Children's Hospital in Denver and had him checked out there. And there was an entire team of neurologists who ended up being put on his case, because the videos I had did look like infantile spasms. They did look at the research I had, and they jumped right on it and started doing the testing. And ultimately they found out there was nothing wrong. But the difference there was not that the first guy was right because there really wasn't anything wrong. It's that he didn't prove to me that my child was okay. They went through the test. They proved to me that nothing was wrong. So if you think there's something wrong with your kid, don't back down on it. Get a second opinion. Take them to the Children's Hospital. Take them to somebody else until somebody is willing to at least prove to you that nothing's wrong. And it's not like the test for that was something invasive. Like I could understand if they didn't want to do a spinal tap because it wasn't indicated, because that's a kind of invasive, very painful. But it was an EEG that they had to do for that. That was it.
Yeah, and they basically just monitored him overnight. He had the little things on his head, and he really didn't care. He was pretty happy. But so, and it's easier, I think, to keep pushing when it's your child. But if you're a person who gets intimidated or forgets what you wanted to ask, I always say whatever questions you have, write them down. And if you find yourself getting intimidated, bring somebody with you for support, because it is an intimidating setting when a doctor, because sometimes they don't have a very good bedside manner. I personally I had no issues advocating for my child. I mean, I threatened to actually unalive a doctor if I didn't get the referral that I wanted. And I got that referral within the 10 seconds that I gave him to comply. So I don't have a problem with it, but I do know there are a lot of people who do. And I know that there are a lot of people who aren't willing to risk possible prison time, because I'm sure what I said was probably against the law. I really didn't care. So I trust my mom gut, and I think you should too. And if you end up being wrong, so what?
And
it's fine. like your kid's okay, and now you have peace of mind, and that's worth everything.
Yeah, and I think we kind of talked about that too with the finances and the insurance.
Yeah.
And I know you dealt with that a lot with Paige, with, she didn't have insurance for a while as a kid. And
Right.
it
The rules
was,
were different then. So I had insurance when she first got sick. As I said, it's a chronic illness. So she was 5 years old when she got sick, and we went on from there. She was doing really well for a time. Uh, anyway, I didn't have insurance. Like insurance had lapsed for a while, whatever, between jobs and all of that kind of stuff. And then, so she could be covered under the new insurance, but her pre-existing condition couldn't. And I don't think that they can do that anymore, but that they did used to. It doesn't even matter why you don't have insurance. Like it doesn't matter if you find yourself in that situation. Your child comes first. Don't let it even cross your mind, because I didn't care. I mean, I cared. Like I had times where I was like, oh my God, we are going to be paying these medical bills like for the rest of our lives. It's going to be terrible. You won't. You'll get it handled. Look into the resources that your state has. Look into any of that kind of stuff. Even some churches and stuff, I think, have programs to help people and stuff too. So look into those later. Get the care you need now. But you can also, if you are self-pay, you can negotiate the cost of things. But you got to be really honest with your creditors, talk to them. A lot of them did lower a lot of prices for us. And even her nephrologist, who she went to for over a decade, and he was fantastic. He didn't even charge me for his visits when the insurance lapsed and that wasn't being covered, which a lot of doctors aren't going to do that, but God love him. He got into medicine for the right reasons. And he was like, it's fine. You don't pay this bill. Unfortunately, you still have to pay for the labs, but he's like, I can forego my bill until, it's fine. So talk to these people. They're human beings too, but take care of your child. But on the same vein, you will do all of that for your child, because you know that it's your child. You're going to do whatever you need to do, but you're worth as much too.
yeah.
So do it for yourself as well. Because I know I did not do it for myself until things got really, really bad, because I just was so tired of dealing with it. But, so you're worth it too. Definitely write things down. And the other thing I want to talk to you about raising a child with a chronic illness, try really hard to keep things as normal as possible for that child. So when she first got sick, the first time she went to the hospital, we literally had to bring the truck to bring everything home. Like there was so many balloons and Beanie Babies. I can't even tell you how many Beanie Babies. And she was so cute. Like that the nurses were buying her Beanie Babies too. Like not just the family. And that was fine. The second time she went to the hospital, same thing. The third time, the same thing. Well, then it got to a point where hospital visits were going to be a regular thing, and so I had to tell the grandparents and stuff. And this is hard, and I do not really try to hamper grandparents from spoiling my children. But on this one, I was like, look, we have to keep things as normal as possible. And unfortunately, going to the hospital is becoming the norm, and it's going to be the norm for a while. So we cannot have a truckload of stuff every time she goes to the hospital, and we can't have this many visitors every time we go to the hospital. I will call you if something changes, but while we're here at the hospital, we're going to observe nap time and all of that, which my daughter was really ticked off about, because like she went to the hospital, she got all this stuff. Well, you don't want your kid to end up with Munchausen's when they're older, and that does. And if you don't know what Munchausen's is, it's feigning illnesses to get attention. Munchausen's by proxy is moms making their kids sick or feigning kids' illnesses to get attention through their children. But Munchausen's is when you do it with yourself. Well, a lot of people who have that as adults have chronic illnesses as children. And that's the reason why it becomes a thing, where they get all this attention and all of that. So you want to try to keep things normal, not because your kid's going to end up with Munchausen's. It's just kids need routine, and it's, like if you get out of your child's routine and they like go to a birthday party or something like that, and then they didn't have nap time. If your child is a child who regularly naps, it takes like 2 days to get your kid back on track. It's the same thing when you have to take your kids to a hospital or something like that. It's like by the time when you get home, it's like this whole readjustment period. So I just tried to keep things really normal every time we went. Like we kept the same routine at the hospital that we had at home. Like this is what time it is. It's nap time. You're gonna take a nap. We're gonna keep it as normal as possible. And also, children don't like to feel different. So if they're a child with a chronic illness, they're going to feel different already. So you try to keep things just that structure. Kids need it. That's one piece of advice I have for you. The other piece of advice I have for you is the sky can't always be falling. It's exhausting. So you have to come to a place where you're able to say to yourself, like, the illness that my child has might end up being very catastrophic someday. I'm aware of that in the back of my head, and I have been since she was 5. But I have to come to a place where I can say to myself, she's okay today. And just live for today. We'll cross whatever bridges we have to cross to. And let me tell you why that's important. She's an adult now, and she gets in places where she's like, feeling her mortality at a much younger age than anybody should have to think about that. And so I have to be the calm in that storm she's having and be like, honey, you're fine today. Things are okay today. So just don't worry about it. It's fine. Not that I don't sympathize and empathize with her. Of course I do, but I'm not going to let her drown in that. But if she had grown up seeing me drown in that, how would I possibly be able to tell her that now? You know what I mean? You've got a model. We've talked about it on other podcasts about all kinds of different topics. You have to model what you need, what is healthy, because she's going to have to live with this for her whole life,
Mm-hmm.
So that's another piece of advice that I have as far as dealing with a child with a chronic illness, and keep the records.
I'm outside with the kiddos right now, but I wanted to say that concludes part 1 of our chronic illness episode. It was originally just going to be 1 episode, but again, my mom and I like to talk. So chronic illnesses is going to be 2 parts. So stay tuned for that coming next week.